Welcome to tonight's journey. We're stepping back in time, not to the roar of battle, but to the quiet, tense years that preceded it. This is the story of how the world, still bruised and mourning from the Great War, stumbled toward an even greater catastrophe. We're going to explore the seeds of conflict, the rise of a new kind of darkness, and the moments when the world had a choice. Before you drift off, if you find yourself enjoying this quiet corner of history, do me a small favor and tap that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim those lights, flip on a fan for that gentle hum, and tuck yourself in. Let's find a cozy spot, take a nice slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to a world of questionable peace, where every shadow holds a new danger. Part 1. The Ghost of the Great War. You are there. The year is 1919. A light drizzle falls on the cobbled streets of Paris, mirroring the mood of the men gathered in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles. The air is thick with the scent of wet stone and unexpressed fury. You are not a statesman, not a general. You are simply a witness, a person in the crowd, watching a moment that will define a century. You see the faces of the German delegates, their expressions a mixture of exhaustion and silent seething rage as they are handed the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. It is a document meant to ensure peace, but it feels like a punishment. It demands that Germany accept full responsibility for the war, that it pay impossible reparations, that it dismantle its army, and that it cede vast swathes of its territory. To you, watching from a distance, it feels less like a treaty and more like a wound, a deep, festering cut on the body of Europe. The French delegates, their country savaged by 4 years of brutal trench warfare, see it as a just retribution. The British delegates, weary of war, see it as a necessary evil. But you, standing in the cold rain, feel a profound sense of foreboding. The anger in the eyes of the German delegates is a tangible thing, a cold, hard presence that hangs in the air. This isn't peace, it's a temporary ceasefire. The years that follow are a blur of false optimism and grinding poverty. The roaring 20s begin, and for a brief time, it seems as if the world has moved on. There are jazz clubs and new dances, and a sense of giddy, reckless freedom. But in Germany, the economic reality is a nightmare. The country is drowning in debt, and the currency becomes worthless. You can see it in the faces of the people on the street, the desperation, the silent hunger, the gnawing resentment. A single loaf of bread costs millions of marks. You see a man pushing a wheelbarrow filled with worthless banknotes just to buy a few potatoes. A woman uses the paper money as kindling to start a fire. The pride of a once great nation is being systematically dismantled, and the people are left with nothing but their shame and their anger. And as the economic despair deepens, a new kind of voice rises above the din, a voice that is not interested in treaties or diplomacy, a voice that promises to restore a nation's pride, a voice that speaks of destiny, of a people wronged, of enemies both inside and out. It is a powerful voice, a hypnotic voice, a voice that promises a simple solution to an impossible problem. Part 2. The Rise of the Demagogues. The first of these voices is Benito Mussolini in Italy. You see him in newsreels, a corpulent man with a jutting jaw, delivering speeches with a theatrical flourish, his eyes burning with a messianic zeal. He promises to restore the glory of the Roman Empire, to make the trains run on time, and to silence the dissenters. The people, tired of chaos and political bickering, are drawn to his promise of order and strength. His followers, the black shirts, march in the streets with a chilling, disciplined uniformity. The world, watching from a distance, shrugs it off as an Italian peculiarity, a passing fad. Then comes a man who at first seems like a caricature, a small man with a ridiculous mustache and a penchant for theatrical gestures. His name is Adolf Hitler. He is a failed artist, a veteran of the Great War, and a man who believes, with an absolute and chilling certainty, in his own destiny. He stands in a beer hall, his voice a guttural, furious roar, and he tells the people what they desperately want to hear. He tells them that they are not to blame for their country's humiliation. He tells them that a Jewish conspiracy and a weak, corrupt government are the true culprits. He promises jobs, food, and a return to glory. You see the faces of the people in the crowd, their eyes wide with hope, their bodies leaning forward as if drawn by a powerful, unseen force. They are not listening to a politician. They are listening to a prophet. You see the slow creep of his power. The first step is the political rallies, the torchlight parades, the uniforms, and the flags. The second step is the silencing of dissenters, the book burnings, the arrests, and the concentration camps. You hear whispers of these things, but they seem so far away, so alien to the civilized world. The Western democracies, still reeling from the Great Depression, have their own problems. They are focused inward, on their own shattered economies and their own political turmoil. They believe that Hitler is a German problem, a man who can be reasoned with, a temporary leader who will surely be replaced by a more sensible one. They have no idea what they are dealing with. And in the East, a new kind of monster is rising. Joseph Stalin. He is a man of quiet, unyielding menace. He is not a charismatic orator. He rules through fear, through a network of spies and informants. He promises a utopian society, a world without poverty and class divisions. The cost is the lives of millions of people who are deemed enemies of the state. You hear stories of the famines, of the forced labor camps, of the purges that systematically eliminate anyone who might pose a threat to his power. The world watches, horrified but impotent. The Russian Revolution and the promise of communism were supposed to be a new beginning, but they have given birth to a totalitarian regime that is as brutal and unforgiving as any that has ever existed. Part 3. The Gathering Storm. The years between 1933 and 1939 are a period of escalating tension, a series of small, seemingly insignificant acts of aggression that begin to paint a picture of what is to come. You watch from a distance as Hitler begins to systematically violate the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. He rearms his country, he marches troops into the demilitarized Rhineland, and he allies himself with Mussolini in Italy. Each time, the world does nothing. The policy is called appeasement, a desperate hope that if you give the bully what he wants, he will be content, and the world will be spared another war. But the bully is never content. You see it in the newsreels. The face of British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, returning from a meeting with Hitler, holding up a piece of paper and proclaiming peace in our time. The people cheer. They want to believe him. They are exhausted by war, by death, by the unending sorrow of the last one. They want to believe that peace can be bought with a piece of paper. But you, watching from a distance, feel the sickening lurch of inevitability. The final act of the polite delusion comes in 1938 with the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria. You see images of German troops marching into Vienna, and you hear the cheers of the Austrian people who welcome them. It feels like a moment of victory, a peaceful unification, but in your heart, you know that a line has been crossed. A sovereign nation has been absorbed by force, and the world has looked the other way. The climax of the pre-war tension is the Sudetenland crisis. Hitler demands that a German-speaking region of Czechoslovakia be ceded to Germany. The Czechs, a small and vulnerable nation, are prepared to fight. They have a strong army and a powerful ally in France. But the French and British, in a last-ditch effort to avoid war, agree to a conference in Munich. They decide the fate of a sovereign nation without its consent. You see the face of the Czech president, Edvard Beneš, as he is told the news. His face is a mask of shock and betrayal. He knows that his country has just been thrown to the wolves. The final betrayal is the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression pact between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. The news comes as a shock to the world. Two sworn enemies, two totalitarian states, have just signed a deal to divide Eastern Europe between them. It is a cynical, cold-blooded act of political expediency. And you, watching the newsreels, feel a cold, hard certainty. This is it. This is the end of the polite delusion. The world is on the brink, and there is nothing anyone can do to stop it. Part 4. The dawn of a new war. You are not alone in this feeling. Across the world, people are preparing. In Britain, people are buying gas masks. Children are being evacuated from the cities, and air raid shelters are being built. In America, President Franklin D. Roosevelt is quietly and systematically preparing his country for a war that he knows is coming. In Japan, the militarists are in control, and they have their own designs on the Pacific. The world is a house of cards, and a single gust of wind will send it all tumbling down. That gust of wind comes on September 1st, 1939. German troops, in a new and terrifying kind of warfare called Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, invade Poland. You hear the news on the radio. It is a quiet, dispassionate voice, but the words are a hammer blow to your chest. The world holds its breath. Will Britain and France finally act? Will they declare war, or will they once again look the other way? The answer comes on September 3rd. You are listening to the radio, your heart pounding in your chest. The voice of Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, the man who promised peace, comes on the air. His voice is tired. His words are a solemn and grave acknowledgement of failure. He says, "This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany." The sound of the radio is a small, insignificant crackle in the quiet of the room, but the words are a loud, unyielding finality. This is it. The world is at war. The polite delusion is over. The great experiment has failed, and you, sitting in the quiet of your home, with a sense of dread in your heart, know that the long, dark journey has just begun. Now, as the radio signal fades and the quiet of the room returns, I hope you can feel the heavy weight of that moment. The fear, the anger, the quiet despair of a world that was given so many chances to change course and failed to take a single one. This is not a story of heroes and villains just yet. This is a story of a world, a place of people like you and me, who watched it all happen and who were about to experience the greatest trial of their lives. Part 5. The Phony War. You are there. The year is 1940. A quiet, eerie silence hangs over the Western Front. Britain and France have declared war on Germany, but nothing has happened. No grand battles, no trench warfare. The air is still. This period is called the Phony War, a time of waiting, of unspoken fear, of a world holding its breath. You see soldiers in France, sitting in their trenches, playing cards, and reading letters from home. The newspapers run stories of this strange, quiet conflict, but you know in your heart that it is just the calm before the storm. The silence is not a sign of peace. It is the sound of a spring being coiled tighter and tighter, waiting for the moment to snap. In Britain, life goes on with a strange, nervous energy. People are carrying gas masks everywhere they go, a constant physical reminder of the danger. Children have been evacuated from the cities and sent to the countryside, a mass migration that has left a gaping hole in the urban centers. You walk through the streets of London, and the city feels hollow, a ghost of its former self. But life continues. In Brest, people are still going to the cinema, still meeting friends in pubs, still listening to the radio for news that never seems to change. The polite delusion may be over, but a new kind of denial, a fragile hope that this war will simply fade away, has taken its place. The illusion shatters on April 9th, 1940. The radio news is a jolt of cold water to your face. Germany has invaded Denmark and Norway. The Lightning War, the Blitzkrieg, is real. The Germans are not interested in a quiet, gentlemanly war. They are interested in conquest. They have used a terrifying new tactic, the rapid movement of tanks and motorized infantry, supported by overwhelming air power. The old, slow, and plodding armies of Europe are no match for this new kind of warfare. The quiet illusion of the phony war is over, and a new, brutal reality has taken its place. Part 6. The Fall of France. You are a witness to the speed of the German advance. On May 10th, 1940, the German army invades Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. The world watches, horrified, as these small, peaceful nations are swallowed whole in a matter of days. The main German force bypasses the heavily fortified French border and simply marches through the Ardennes forest, a place considered impenetrable by the French. You hear stories of the chaos, of the tanks rolling through the countryside, of the civilians fleeing in terror, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. The great French army, considered one of the most powerful in the world, is paralyzed. Its generals are trained to fight the last war, a war of trenches and static lines. They have no answer for the speed and ferocity of the Blitzkrieg. In a matter of weeks, the German army is at the gates of Paris. You hear the news on the radio. Paris has fallen. The city of lights, the heart of European culture, has been taken by an enemy in a matter of days. The shock is profound, a deep, unshakable terror that spreads across the world. The British Army, trapped and surrounded on the beaches of Dunkirk, is in a desperate situation. The world watches, fearing a total annihilation. But in a moment of quiet and probable heroism, a fleet of small boats, fishing trawlers, pleasure yachts, and private motorboats crosses the English Channel to rescue the stranded soldiers. This is not a great military victory. It is a desperate escape, but it is a moment of hope in a world that has been consumed by despair. You see the faces of the soldiers returning home, their faces gaunt with exhaustion, their eyes wide with the trauma of what they have seen. They have escaped, but they have left their equipment, their honor, and their pride on the beaches of France. Part 7. The Hour of Britain. You are there. The year is 1940. The German army stands on the shores of the English Channel, their eyes fixed on Britain. The only thing that stands between Hitler and a complete victory is a single island nation. The British people, who for so long had lived in a world of denial, are now faced with a brutal reality. They are alone. Their army has been defeated, their allies have fallen, and the world is holding its breath, waiting for the final, inevitable blow. But a new voice, a powerful, defiant voice, rises above the din, the voice of Winston Churchill, the new Prime Minister. He is not a man who speaks of peace or appeasement. He is a man who speaks of defiance, of blood, toil, tears, and sweat. You hear his voice on the radio, a deep, gravelly sound that is filled with an unshakable resolve. He promises that Britain will never surrender. He speaks of fighting on the beaches, on the landing grounds, in the fields, and in the streets. He is not offering a polite delusion. He is offering a grim, brutal reality, a promise to fight to the very last man. The German army, in preparation for an invasion, must first destroy the Royal Air Force. The Battle of Britain begins. It is not a battle of tanks and infantry. It is a battle of will, of courage, and of technology. You hear the constant low hum of German bombers in the sky, and you see the contrails of the British fighter planes as they rise to meet them. The air raid sirens are a constant companion, a sound that has become a part of your daily life. You spend your nights in air raid shelters, in a world of fear and anxiety, listening to the bombs fall outside. But the British fighter pilots, in their small, nimble aircraft, fight with a ferocity and a courage that stuns the world. They are outnumbered and outgunned, but they are fighting for their homes, for their families, for their way of life. They are a small elite band of brothers, and they are holding back the tide of darkness with nothing but their courage and their conviction. Part 8. The End of the Beginning. Fjord torn Paschly. The German army, unable to defeat the Royal Air Force and faced with the logistical nightmare of a cross-channel invasion, finally calls it off. It is not a final victory for Britain. It is a temporary reprieve, but it is a moment of profound hope in a world that has been consumed by despair. The British people have held their own. They have stared into the abyss, and they have refused to blink. You, listening to the news on the radio, feel a sense of relief wash over you. The terror is still there, but it is now a quiet, manageable fear. The world is not over. There is still a chance. The great experiment has not failed. Not yet. The war is far from over, but the end of the beginning has come. Part 9, Operation Barbarossa. You are there. The year is 1941. The polite, silent tension between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union is about to be shattered. Despite their non-aggression pact, both sides have been preparing. Germany has a powerful, disciplined army, and Hitler, with a chilling certainty, believes that the Soviet Union is a Judeo-Bolshevik state that will collapse at the first sign of pressure. He believes that the Soviet army, a force he views as disorganized and weak, will be no match for his blitzkrieg. The invasion, codenamed Operation Barbarossa, is the largest military operation in history. The attack comes on June 22, 1941. There is no declaration of war, no warning. The invasion is a shock to the world and to the Soviet Union. The German army, a massive force of over 3 million men, 3,000 tanks, and thousands of aircraft, rolls across the border in a thunderous, terrifying advance. The air is filled with the roar of planes, the rumble of tanks, and the screams of the people. The Red Army, taken completely by surprise, is routed. Entire divisions are encircled and captured. You see the newsreels, the long, endless columns of German tanks, the terrified faces of the Soviet prisoners of war, and the smug, arrogant faces of the German soldiers. The speed of the advance is breathtaking. The German army, in a matter of weeks, has advanced hundreds of miles. They are at the gates of Moscow. They are at the gates of Leningrad. The world watches, mesmerized and horrified by the sheer scale of the conflict. The war, which for so long had been a distant drama in Western Europe, is now a vast, brutal, and unforgiving struggle that will consume millions of lives. But the Germans have made a fatal mistake. They have underestimated the sheer size of the Soviet Union and the resolve of the Soviet people. The German army, designed for a short, quick war, is now bogged down in a long, endless campaign. The roads are nothing but mud. The distances are vast, and the resistance, though disorganized at first, is now becoming more and more determined. The Soviet people, faced with the brutal reality of a foreign invasion, are fighting for their very existence. Part 10. The Siege and the Frozen Hell. Embryo. The first brutal act of this new war is the siege of Leningrad. The German army surrounds the city, cutting off all supply routes. For 900 days, the people of Leningrad are starved, shelled, and frozen. You hear the stories, whispered in hushed tones, of people eating their pets, of the streets being filled with the bodies of the dead, of the people who survive on nothing but a handful of bread each day. It is a slow, methodical, and brutal act of extermination, a cold, clinical siege that is as terrifying as any battle. The city does not fall. It holds on with a quiet, unyielding courage that will become the defining characteristic of the Eastern Front. As the winter of 1941 sets in, a new enemy, one far more powerful than any army, arrives: the Russian winter. The temperature drops to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The German tanks, designed for a summer war, break down. The oil turns to a thick, viscous goo. The soldiers, dressed in summer uniforms, freeze to death in their positions. They are not fighting an army, they are fighting the very land itself. The snow is thick, the roads are impassable, and the world is a silent, white, frozen hell. The German advance grinds to a halt. The dreams of a quick and easy victory have been shattered. The Soviet army, which had been in disarray, now begins to reorganize and to fight back with a brutal ferocity. They are fighting on their own land, they are fighting for their homes, and they are fighting a war of survival. The polite rules of engagement, the gentlemanly way of fighting, is gone. This is a war of extermination. Part 11, the Stalingrad Cauldron. You are a witness to the final bloody act of the German advance. The city of Stalingrad, a city of no strategic importance, but a symbol of immense symbolic power, becomes the center of the world's attention. Hitler, in a fit of pride and arrogance, demands that the city be taken at any cost. The battle is a nightmare, a close quarters, house-to-house, room-to-room struggle for survival. The city is a ruin, a landscape of broken buildings and burnt-out tanks. The soldiers fight in the sewers, in the bombed-out buildings, and in the ruins of the factories. The German army, exhausted and demoralized, is slowly, inexorably being worn down. They are running out of ammunition, out of food, and out of men. The Soviet army, in a brilliant strategic move, encircles the city, trapping the entire German Sixth Army inside. The world watches, horrified, as an entire army is trapped in a frozen hell, without food, without ammunition, and without hope. On February 10th, 1943, the last of the German forces surrender. It is a moment of profound, world-changing importance. The invincible German army has been defeated. The tide of the war has turned. The myth of German invincibility is shattered. The world breathes a collective sigh of relief. But you, watching from a distance, know that this is not an end. It is a new, brutal beginning. The war is far from over, but the end of the beginning has come. Part 12, the slow, grinding retreat. The war on the Eastern Front from 1943 onward is a long, brutal, and bloody retreat for the German army. The Soviet army, now fully reorganized and re-equipped, begins a slow, inexorable push westward. They are not interested in a quick victory. They are interested in a slow, methodical, and brutal destruction of the German army. The fighting is constant, the casualties are immense, and the land is scarred by the long, grinding conflict. You hear the names of the battles, whispers of unimaginable carnage. Kursk, a battle of tanks on a scale that will never be seen again. The liberation of Kiev, the advance into Poland. The German army, once a powerful and disciplined force, is now a broken, exhausted, and demoralized remnant of its former self. The war in the East is not a battle for territory. It is a battle for survival. Part 13. The Sleeping Giant. You are there. The year is 1941. The world is at war, but your country, the United States of America, is not. You are a witness to a nation that is still reeling from the Great Depression, a people who are tired of conflict, a government that is committed to neutrality. You hear the news from Europe and from the Eastern Front, but it feels distant, a far-off drama that has no bearing on your life. The world is a quiet, peaceful place, or so it seems. But in the background, things are in motion. In the quiet, unassuming port of Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, a fleet of massive battleships sits in the warm tropical sun. The sailors are enjoying a quiet Sunday morning. They are playing baseball, writing letters home, and eating breakfast. There is a calm, peaceful feeling in the air, a sense of quiet, unyielding calm. They have no idea that in the skies above them, a fleet of Japanese aircraft, a silent, disciplined swarm, is preparing for an attack. The attack comes on December 7th, 1941. There is no warning, no declaration of war. A storm of bombs and torpedoes falls from the sky, a sudden, horrifying tempest that shatters the calm of the morning. You hear the news on the radio, a jolt of cold water to your face, the voice of a radio announcer, his voice trembling with a mixture of shock and disbelief, reports on the attack. The sounds of explosions and gunfire can be heard in the background. Your nation, a great sleeping giant, has just been attacked. The shock and anger are profound. The next day, you hear the voice of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, his voice filled with a quiet, unyielding rage. He says, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The nation, which for so long was content to watch from the sidelines, is now at war. The polite delusion is over. A new brutal reality has taken its place. Part 14. The Island Hopping Campaign. The war in the Pacific is not a war of tanks and trenches. It is a war of water, of islands, and of brutal, unforgiving jungle. The Japanese, in a series of lightning-fast advances, seize vast swathes of territory from the Philippines to Singapore. The American and Allied forces, a small, outnumbered army, are in a desperate retreat. You hear the stories of the Bataan Death March, a brutal, horrifying march of American and Filipino prisoners of war who are tortured, starved, and murdered. It is an act of casual, unspeakable cruelty that shakes your nation to its core. But the Americans are not a people who will take a punch without fighting back. They begin a long, brutal, and methodical campaign of island hopping, a slow, painful process of taking one small island after another, each one a stepping stone to the Japanese mainland. You hear the names of these islands, whispers of unimaginable carnage: Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. Each one is a fortress, a natural killing ground, a place of immense suffering and death. The fighting is close quarters, brutal, and unforgiving. The soldiers on both sides are pushed to the very limits of their endurance, their bodies exhausted, their minds broken by the constant fear and violence. The Japanese soldiers, raised in a culture of honor and a profound sense of duty, are taught to fight to the very last man. They do not surrender. They fight with a brutal, unyielding ferocity that terrifies the Allied forces. They are not just fighting for their lives, they are fighting for the honor of their emperor, for the soul of their nation. The war in the Pacific is a war of cultures, a clash of civilizations, and it is a war that will consume millions of lives. Part 15. The end of an era. As the war in Europe draws to a close, the war in the Pacific rages on. The American and Allied forces are at the gates of the Japanese mainland, but the cost of an invasion is too high. The American military, in its war games, predicts that an invasion of Japan will cost 1 million American lives and millions of Japanese lives. The war has gone on for too long, and the American people are tired of the death and the suffering. A new kind of weapon is being developed, a terrifying, world-changing technology that will change the course of human history forever. The Manhattan Project is a secret, a vast scientific undertaking that has consumed billions of dollars and the brightest minds in the world. Its goal is to create a new kind of bomb, a bomb that can end the war in a single moment. On August 6, 1945, the first of these bombs, a weapon of unthinkable power, is dropped on the city of Hiroshima. The city is instantly vaporized. The world watches, horrified, as a mushroom cloud rises into the sky, a silent, terrifying testament to the power of human ingenuity and human cruelty. 3 days later, a second bomb is dropped on the city of Nagasaki. The war is over. The Japanese emperor, a god to his people, announces the surrender of his country. The world, which for so long was consumed by a quiet, gnawing fear, is now consumed by a quiet, profound awe. Part 16. A quiet ending. The war is over. The fighting has stopped, but the memory of what happened will last forever. The world, which for so long was a world of violence, of death, and of suffering, is now a world of quiet reflection. The soldiers are coming home. The prisoners of war are being released. The world, which for so long was a place of darkness, is now a place of hope. Part 17. The longest day. You are there. The year is 1944. All of Europe is holding its breath. For years, the people of the occupied nations have been waiting, praying for a sign that the Allies will finally come and liberate them. The Allied forces have spent 2 years preparing for this moment, a massive, unprecedented military operation. An entire army, with thousands of ships and aircraft, has been gathered in southern England. The air is thick with the scent of salt water, diesel fuel, and unexpressed fear. The soldiers are silent, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and cold, unyielding resolve. The invasion comes on June 6th. This is D-Day. In the pre-dawn darkness, a massive armada of ships crosses the English Channel, their dark shapes looming on the horizon. The air is filled with the low, constant hum of aircraft, and the sky is filled with thousands of paratroopers, silent, ghostly figures, descending into the fields of France. At dawn, the first of the landing craft hit the beaches of Normandy. The beaches have been given code names: Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, Sword. The invasion is a symphony of chaos and terror. The sound of machine gun fire is a constant, unyielding roar. The air is filled with the screams of the dying. the explosions of artillery, and the shouts of the officers. The water is a bloody, churned-up mess of bodies, equipment, and shattered ships. The German soldiers, waiting in their concrete bunkers and trenches, are fighting with a brutal, unyielding ferocity. This is not a battle, it is a slaughter. But the Allies, a force of millions of men, are not to be stopped. They fight with a desperate, all-consuming courage. They crawl over the bodies of their fallen comrades. They push through the machine gun fire, and they slowly, inexorably, begin to gain a foothold on the beaches. The beachhead is secure. The long, bloody march to Berlin has just begun. Part 18, The Battle of the Bulge. The Allied armies, a massive force of American, British, and Canadian soldiers, push through France. The French people, who have lived under the heel of Nazi oppression for years, line the streets to cheer their liberators. The faces of the soldiers are tired, but their eyes are filled with hope. They are winning. The end is in sight. But Hitler, a man who has always believed in his destiny, has one last, desperate, insane gamble. In the dead of winter, on December 16, 1944, he unleashes a massive surprise counterattack. The German army, a broken and defeated force, suddenly attacks through the Ardennes forest, a place considered impenetrable by the Allies. The attack is a complete surprise. The Allied lines are pushed back, and a massive bulge is created. The Battle of the Bulge is a cold, brutal, and terrifying conflict. The fighting is in the deep, snow-covered forests of Belgium, and the soldiers on both sides are pushed to the very limits of their endurance. But the American army, a force of young, inexperienced soldiers, does not break. They fight with a desperate, all-consuming courage. They are outnumbered and outgunned, but they hold their ground. The German offensive, a final desperate gamble, fails. The last gasp of the German war machine has been spent. The long, brutal march to Berlin has begun in earnest. Part 19. The Fall of Berlin, the final assault on Germany, is a slow, methodical, and brutal process. The Soviet army, a massive, unyielding force, is pushing from the east. The American, British, and Canadian armies are pushing from the west. The German army, a broken, defeated, and demoralized force, is fighting with a desperate, brutal ferocity. They are fighting for their homes, for their families, for their very existence. The fighting is in the streets, in the bombed-out buildings, and in the ruins of the cities. The final act of this long and terrible drama is the Battle of Berlin. The Soviet army, a force of millions of men and thousands of tanks, surrounds the city. The fighting is a brutal, house-to-house, room-to-room struggle. Hitler, in a desperate final act of defiance, takes his own life. The German army surrenders. The war in Europe is over. The long, dark night of terror has finally come to an end. Part 20. A quiet ending. The world, which for so long was consumed by a quiet, gnawing fear, is now consumed by a quiet, profound awe. The soldiers are coming home. The prisoners of war are being released. The world, which for so long was a place of darkness, is now a place of hope. The war is over, but the memory of what happened will last forever. Part 21. The Reckoning. You are there. The year is 1945. The war is over, but a new kind of silence, a somber and hollow silence, hangs in the air. The sounds of celebration have faded, replaced by the grim business of cleaning up, of rebuilding, and of holding a powerful nation accountable for its crimes. This is the time of the Nuremberg trials, a quiet, methodical, and unprecedented act of justice. You are not a lawyer or a judge. You are a witness, a person in the back of the courtroom, watching a moment that will change the course of history forever. In the courtroom, a cold, unyielding silence reigns. The defendants, once powerful leaders of the Third Reich, are now just men in suits, their faces gaunt, their eyes filled with a quiet, unyielding arrogance. You hear the testimony of the survivors, their voices trembling with a mixture of fear and courage. They speak of things that are unspeakable, of concentration camps and gas chambers, of a systematic and industrialized campaign of murder. The world, which for so long had ignored the whispers and the rumors, is now faced with a brutal, unyielding truth. The trial is a slow, methodical process, a quiet, unyielding march toward justice. The verdicts are delivered, the sentences are passed. It is not an act of revenge, but an act of accountability, a solemn promise to the world that never again will such crimes go unpunished. You watch from a distance as the men who once held the power of life and death are now stripped of everything, their faces a mixture of disbelief and quiet, gnawing rage. The era of unchecked power and military might has come to an end, and a new era of international law and human rights has begun. Part 22. A new hope. In the wake of the war, a new kind of hope begins to take root. The world's leaders, sobered by the horrors they have witnessed, gather to create a new kind of institution. They call it the United Nations. It is a place where nations, regardless of their size or their power, can come together to resolve their differences through dialogue, not through war. You see the newsreels of the first meeting, the faces of the delegates filled with a quiet, unyielding hope. They are not naive. They know that the world is a dangerous place, but they believe, with a quiet, fierce conviction, that a new kind of peace is possible, a peace that is built on a foundation of respect, understanding, and cooperation. And in the background, a new conflict, a cold and silent war is beginning. The old alliances have been shattered, and two new superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, are now locked in a struggle for global dominance. The war is not fought with tanks and guns. It is fought with spies, with propaganda, and with a terrifying new kind of weapon. The world, which for so long was consumed by a quiet, gnawing fear, is now consumed by a new kind of quiet, cold anxiety. The war may be over, but the shadows of conflict still linger. But for now, there is peace. The soldiers are coming home. The prisoners of war are being released. The cities are being rebuilt. The world, which for so long was a place of darkness, is now a place of hope. The children, who for so long were raised in a world of fear, are now raised in a world of peace. The world has been remade, a painful, brutal, and necessary process that will change the course of human history forever. Part 23. A final farewell. And so we have come to the end of our journey. We have walked through the muddy fields of Versailles. We have stood in the quiet of the phony war. We have witnessed the terror of the Blitzkrieg, the brutality of the Eastern Front, the chaos of the Pacific, and the final reckoning in a courtroom in Nuremberg. We have seen the darkest parts of human nature, but we have also seen the best, the quiet, unyielding courage of a people who refused to surrender, the profound selflessness of the soldiers who saved a nation, and the quiet, fierce hope of the people who rebuilt a shattered world. And as you drift off to sleep tonight, let the images of that time settle in your mind, the faces of the people who lived through it, the solemn stillness of a courtroom, the hopeful chatter of the United Nations, and the quiet promise that tomorrow will be better. All of it is part of the story, and all of it is part of the reason for the great conflagration to come. Sleep well, rest easy. This long and terrible story has come to an end.